Technical Sergeant Emily Carter wiped the sweat from her brow as she worked under the belly of an A-10 Thunderbolt at Mountain Home Air Force Base. At 26, she had already served 6 years in the Air Force, 3 of them in Afghanistan. Her petite frame let her slip into tight spaces other mechanics couldn't reach, but it also made her a target for jabs. The Idaho sun scorched the flight line, and Emily had learned to shrug off both the heat and the snide remarks from passing pilots. She kept her focus on her work, just as her grandfather had shown her back in Oakley, Idaho, where she'd helped him repair old farm equipment as a kid. The military had toughened her, but it hadn't dulled her spirit. Behind her quiet brown eyes burned a resolve few could match. Growing up in Oakley, a town of barely 4,000, Emily stood out. While other girls played with toys, she was in her grandfather's shed, learning the difference between a socket and a spanner. Her dad walked out when she was 8, and her mom pulled double shifts at a local cafe to make ends meet. An Air Force recruiter at her high school promised training, purpose, and a chance to serve something greater. What he didn't mention was that Emily would uncover a knack for flying. During her second deployment to Afghanistan, she earned her private pilot's license in her off hours, spending every spare cent on flight time at a dusty airstrip near Bagram. Her instructor, an aging Afghan pilot named Farid, said her hands moved like they were born for the controls. But back at base, she was just a mechanic, keeping other people's dreams aloft. The irony wasn't lost on her. She fixed what others flew, never getting to prove what she could do in the cockpit. Trouble brewed one Monday when Lieutenant Colonel Bradley, new to the base from a Pentagon desk job, decided to inspect the maintenance bay. He strutted through the hangar and stopped at Emily's workstation, where she was overhauling an engine part. Ignoring her rank and name tag, he demanded to know why a woman was handling critical aircraft systems. His voice echoed, drawing stares from other mechanics and officers. He questioned her skills, her experience, and suggested she'd be better off pushing papers. The words stung, but what hurt more was her fellow mechanics' silence, their eyes fixed on the floor despite her 6 years of spotless service. When Bradley found her flight logbook in her toolbox, he waved it like a guilty verdict, proclaiming mechanics had no business playing pilot. He confiscated the logbook, calling her ambitions a distraction. The hangar went quiet, as Emily's face burned with humiliation under dozens of watching eyes. That night, alone in her quarters, Emily stared at the empty spot in her footlocker where her logbook had been. Bradley's words weighed on her like a physical burden. She thought of her grandfather, who'd beamed with pride when she enlisted, always saying she could fix anything. But how could she fix a system that judged her gender before her service, her size before her skill? The faces of her squadron mates lingered in her mind, men she'd worked alongside for years, whose lives relied on her precision, yet who stayed silent when her dignity was publicly dismantled. Sleep eluded her. Instead, she recalled the thrill of flying, the way aircraft responded to her touch, Farid's words about hands that spoke to planes. But what use were gifted hands if no one gave them a chance to shine? The next few weeks brought relentless flights that seemed designed to crush her. Bradley assigned her menial tasks, keeping her from the complex repairs she excelled at. Her request for her logbook was denied without reason. When she tried booking flight time at a civilian airstrip on leave, she learned Bradley had contacted them, implying she was misusing military time. Her fellow mechanics began to distance themselves. Some avoided her. Others made snide remarks about her flying dreams. The isolation was suffocating. Her mother's weekly calls grew harder as Emily struggled to mask her stress. The base chaplain suggested a non-maintenance role, which felt like surrender. Word of the incident spread, and sympathetic glances from other female airmen made her feel more like a victim than a veteran. The breaking point came when Bradley announced mandatory training for maintenance crews on knowing their place, clearly aimed at her. The guilt of burdening her team nearly shattered her. 3 months later, during a routine exercise, everything shifted in 15 minutes. An F-16 Fighting Falcon suffered simultaneous radio and hydraulic failure while approaching the airfield. The pilot, Captain Sullivan, was flying blind with dwindling fuel and limited control. The control tower was in disarray, unable to communicate as the jet wobbled dangerously. Emergency vehicles lined the runway, but without radio contact, a safe landing seemed impossible. In the maintenance hangar, Emily heard the sirens and stepped outside, watching the F-16's erratic passes. Her mind clicked seen this failure combo before in Afghanistan and knew the pilot was losing the fight. Without hesitation, she sprinted to the tower, shoving past security and racing up the stairs. Inside, Bradley was coordinating the crisis, his face ashen with the weight of a pilot's life. Emily's voice cut through the chaos, pinpointing exactly what Sullivan was facing and what to do next. Her deep knowledge of the aircraft systems made her the most qualified person in the room. The tower chief glanced at her, then at the struggling jet, and handed her the radio headset, ordering her to guide Sullivan through the emergency landing. Her voice broadcast over the emergency frequency, call sign Sparrow-01. The base fell silent, listening. With steady precision, Emily talked Sullivan through manual procedures, explaining how to counter the hydraulic failure and when to deploy emergency systems. Her instructions were clear, confident, and flawless. The F-16 landed safely on its second try, and the tower erupted in cheers. As emergency crews surrounded the jet and Sullivan climbed out unharmed, he asked to meet Sparrow-01. When he learned his savior was the mechanic he'd seen in the hangar, he publicly requested Emily be recommended for the Air Force Commendation Medal and endorsed her for officer training and pilot school. Bradley stood speechless as base personnel lined up to shake Emily's hand, thanking her for her service. The woman he'd tried to diminish had just proven her indispensable value. That evening, her logbook was quietly returned to her locker with a formal apology and a recommendation letter from the base commander. 2 years later, Second Lieutenant Emily Carter sat in the cockpit of her own F-16, ready for her first solo flight as a qualified Air Force pilot. Her call sign, Sparrow-01, was now hers, a testament to how the unlikeliest heroes can hide in plain sight. Her story became a base legend not because she was a woman who proved herself, but because she was a veteran who refused to let others define her worth. The mechanics who worked on her jet now did so with newfound respect, knowing the pilot understood every nut, bolt, and wire. In her flight suit pocket, she carried a photo of her grandfather beside his old tractor, the man who taught her that anything broken could be fixed with patience and skill. As she taxied to the runway, Emily knew some things that seemed broken were just waiting for the right person to make them soar.